Hello, everybody. Good evening from India and good morning, good afternoon from the various time zones from which we have congregated to greet you on behalf of the Hearth Within. Thank you very much for consenting to be with us to celebrate a very special book that has taken over a year to bring into this world and which has been birthed by a remarkable panel of editors. What is very important, I believe, is not just the theme of the book, which is, of course, wonderful. It's about the spaces and the places that anchor us, that sustain us, that nourish us. But it is also about a kind of collaborative, creative project. And a set of 8 editors together collaborated from various geographical regions, selecting contributors who would be able to respond to a theme like this. And the result is Soul Spaces, poems on towns, cities, and villages. Thank you for being a part of the book. Thank you for being a part of this evening. And I would like to welcome you all to the Hearth Within with a welcome address by my co-collaborator, Jaydeep sir. Jaydeep sir, over to you.
Thank you. Smiling welcome, friends, the soul makers from different time zones, from different lands. The Hearth Within is committed to bring poetry at the heart of the world. We believe that poetry is the most important medium for social change, change for a better tomorrow. Poetry is for life and longings. Soul Spaces, poems on cities, towns, and villages, edited by 8 editors. Thank you, all editors. One of them is myself, and another is Basudhara, other 6, considering Hearth Within and giving us an opportunity to launch it here officially. Thank you, all other editors who trusted it on our shoulders. It's an important anthology. I always consider that this is one of the democratic anthologies I ever took part from since the beginning. It is the most democratic anthology, I say, because where the editors are from different backgrounds, proof checks many times at many levels, and inputs were shot at every step of the book. I thank profusely Anita Di and Basudhara for coordinating everything so professionally and wholeheartedly. I thank the other editors who are with me, like Swati, Malashri, Nandini, Miller, and Cyril, who are here on the panel, and really making it an anthology that will stay for some time. It's an anthology for world poetry, and world poetry anthologies are always subjectives. We cannot say this is definite. We don't claim it. It's a challenge. It's a shared artistic space. And the poets from the US, Canada, UK, India, Australia, and Africa have contributed. We could not include the Latin America. Hope we'll make it in our next anthology. I welcome you on board. We have a very special artist today, Shubham Poti, who has designed the cover and the beautiful jacket. And thank you, the publisher of Trust, Authors Press, Sudarshanji, for making it so elegant and truly international. I welcome with these words. Thank you, and we are looking forward to a great feast of ideas. Thank you. Thank you, each and everyone, for your time and giving us an opportunity to launch it via Hearth Within. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for the wonderful words. Thank you for welcoming everyone officially. And we have to admit that the inspiration for Soul Spaces came from Anita Nahal. She has been the lead editor in conceptualizing the anthology, in crafting this wonderful panel of editors, and in visualizing, the kind of voice that it wanted to bring into the world. So to launch into Soul Spaces would be to begin with an invitation to Anita Nahal to discuss the idea of how, Poems on towns, cities, and villages came to her mind. So, Anita Nahal, it's over to you.
Thank you so much, Basudhara. This is really has been a collaborative effort, and I am not going to. Jaydeep said some absolutely wonderful words, so I think I will go in a different direction and not repeat. So most of us think of the impact and power of places and spaces, besides that of people on our lives. And it's not nothing unusual. And I've been doing it so forever that I can recount, fascinated by our existence, placement, our hierarchical possibilities, whence we care from, maybe from another universe or dimension, and where to we are traveling. I mean, how can we overlook the origin of species? We can't ignore Darwin and transmutation, or as they say in French, the transformisme of species. So, how spaces, places define, develop, nurture, or not? My childhood, youth, and adulthood were spent in making personal and public spaces mine or someone else's more congenial and safer. And yes, I burnt my fingers quite a few times doing that. I left a country, changed citizenships, altered our living spaces, and we have traveled to and moved and lived in many, many places. So, the essence and the core connection with my body, mind, and soul of spaces is the reason I write a lot about injustices in my poetry. And bringing out such an anthology for me was a natural corollary. By training, I'm a historian. So I study and teach about public and private spaces through time and about the people that lived there, about governments that existed and flourished or were destroyed, or spaces ruined by natural calamities, and how some spaces or people and happenings therein can become cognitive and real, what is called in history, push and pull models of immigration and migration, or how some individuals are forcibly moved from their roots, their native spaces without choice. We could not have grown up and gone through school and college not having read about great wars or great decisions, great humans, great thriving successes, or great famines, and how cities and towns and villages, even the ocean, skies, and the air around us have become and still become petri dishes for human behavior to generate, witness, emulate, or reject. And COVID 19 became for millions a prime parameter for analyzing, defining, comprehending, and misjudging others, besides the fact that millions lost their lives in their very known, very loved personal spaces. So, belonging as an identity, in my opinion, was replaced by survival from a virus gone berserk. As an immigrant myself, I've always held dearly to the words of Nigerian poet Ijoma Ume Binyo from her poetry book, Questions for Ada. She says, "So here you are, too foreign for home, too foreign for here, never enough for both." And I humbly add that we are not home anywhere except when we are with our loved ones, which is more so clear in the increasing global dystopian culture. So I discussed, with all that in my mind, I discussed the idea of the anthology with Basudhara Roy, and then we approached others, all of whom I have known in some capacity or the other, or in and from some spaces and places, including for most of the editors. Our first introductions happened, and our continuing interactions are still going on in virtual spaces. I haven't met Cyril Dabydeen or Jaydeep Sarangi or Nandini Sahu or Swati Pal. So the virtual space is also a very critical space for us to keep in mind. And as Jaydeep said, the book was a compilation of hard work by 8 editors across physical, spatio-temporal, and emotional spaces. And it would not have been a reality as an entity in the tactile space of our hands if it did not have such amazing contributors from US, India, the UK, South Africa, Bahrain, Canada, and Australia. And I think we have about 80 or so contributors. I'm going to end with a little word about the jacket, because I know we have our very creative jacket designer, Shubham Kumar Pati, who's going to speak for himself. But we wanted something that alludes to the notion and corporeality of spaces, something tangible yet wispy, magical with twinkling stars. And we wanted folks to look at the jacket and feel their presence and essence in their treasured spaces, imagined or real. And we believe that Shubham has done it. So that's my little background. I had 5 minutes. I made most use of it. And I welcome all the poets and the editors, and I look forward to listening to all of you. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And indeed, I think that a proper discussion of the book should also begin with the book cover. So here we have a very talented designer with us. He's very young, and to speak personally, he has been my student. He is a graduate from Jamshedpur. He lives, his home is a few miles away from Jamshedpur in a place called Saraikella, which is known for its chow background and also for some wonderful laddus, locally. Shubham has a very close interaction with place. And Shubham has gone on to do his master's in English from Wardha. He's now about to embark on a career in education. He's recently got a JRF in education and is going to work there. But splendidly, Shubham has done a number of powerful creative projects. He is designing the IPPL journal. He has designed my Anita Ma'am's and many other websites. And he is a fabulous designer who brings his own youthful creative input into whatever he does. So with that introduction, partial introduction, I invite Shubham to talk about his journey in designing the book cover. Shubham, over to you.
Okay, ma'am. Hello, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you so much. I think it is before 8 or 9 months, and I suddenly got a call from you, ma'am, and then you told that there is a book that is Soul Spaces, and which will be released by, I think, Author Press publication, and you will have to design the jacket of that particular book. So, and let me know how you can create the structures, light and space over there. So, and after that, after I think few days, 2 or 3 days, I just got a text from ma'am, Anita ma'am, and it was like so much surprising for me. And she told Shubham that these are our plan, and how would you do or draw any idea for the jacket. So I shared 4 or 5 book cover, I think, if I can remember correctly, and there are some cities, villages, herds, and spaces, skies, colorful, of dusky, and so on and so forth. And after that, there was a voting process, and the people and the editor selected that concept of hanging building. And after the selection of that particular concept, we were continuously altering the theme for up to 5 months. I think I can remember correctly. And Anita ma'am was like, ये जो बिल्डिंग है उसमें थोड़ा सा स्टार डाल सकते हैं क्या? अच्छा एक काम करते हैं, स्काई को नाइट कर देते हैं. अच्छा ये ऐसे हो सकता है क्या? Oh, okay, wait. जब हम लोगों का डिजाइन फाइनल हुआ, and she told me suddenly after 1 month that Subham, can you see the picture in details? There is a tomb kind of shape in there in the building. So can we hide that? So uske baad and we are going to hide the tombs. So these are the detailing for the cover, and that's how. And now we have the jacket. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, Shubham. Thank you. And Shubham was so happy after having designed the jacket that when the book came out, he did not even wait for us to send him a copy. He was the first one to order the book from Amazon and get himself a copy. And he shared pictures to all of us that this is how the book looks. So thank you. That was, you allow us the privilege to repeatedly customize our designs. Thank you very much for that. And now we launch into a proper discussion of the journeys that the various editors had with the anthology. And we begin in alphabetical order with Cyril. So Cyril, it is over to you and how you feel having been a part of this lovely anthology.
Thank you very much, Basudhara. Can everybody hear me clearly?
Yes, perfect.
Okay.
Perfect.
I'm speaking from Ottawa, as perhaps all of you know, and I must confess, I spent most of the morning in Ottawa. Guess what I was doing? I was watching IPL cricket. I'm a great cricket fan. And right after this event is over, I'm going back to my TV to watch Mumbai Indians batting and playing IPL. First of all, and I want to speak very informally, conversationally, that it was an amazing experience to work on this anthology, and I want to thank Anita primarily for her leadership role. I do think I've done 3 anthologies myself in Canada and in the Caribbean, where I was born, and doing an anthology is very, very hard work. I congratulate Anita, and I've told her this a few times, that she's a great diplomat. And if she weren't teaching in Washington, she should be working for the United Nations because of her great skill. I want to say also that the Ottawa Public Library has acquired a copy of the book. It's a very handsome book, and Subhan, you've done a great job. Congratulations again. Also, the local Ottawa newspaper, and I have a copy in my hand, they did a spread on the book cover. So I'm glad locally, to all my friends, academics, government people, they all have some knowledge of this book already. I want to say that it's so good working in this anthology and looking at the volume. I've looked at the poems and to learn what the various 70 odd or 80 poets, their styles, their rhythms, their cadences, and the many orthodoxies at work. Now, I'm a teacher of creative writing. I've taught for many years. And the first thing I'm looking at when I look at a poem, of course, a poem really and truly is a moment's monument. And I recall also Margaret Atwood, the great Canadian writer. She once told us in New Orleans that poetry and fiction are reflections of the highest forms of human consciousness on how we live on earth. And indeed, a poem is a moment's monument. But what I've seen in the anthology are the different styles at work. You have traditional poets, and many of the poets of Indian origins, I respect, honestly, their orthodoxy. You have modernist poets as well, and sometimes you have a mixture of the two. And I'm reminded of what the Indian-born George Orwell, he said, when people question about orthodoxies, he said, whose smelly orthodoxy are we really talking about? In other words, we should be more accommodating. I've looked at closely, especially about the Indian poets and the sense of Indian mythology, the metaphors, the metonyms. I've reflected, and it was a learning experience for me primarily. The title, Soul Spaces, it combines the metaphysical and the topographical spaces, cities, towns, and villages. And for me, that's what I saw as I would read and skim through each poem. My favorite quotation when I do readings is that literature is the most beautiful of countries. And I'm really quoting a Cuban writer. Now, eventually here, if I get a chance, I would like to read a short section of one of my poems, but let's see how it goes first. But more than anything else, I want to say the importance of the new friendships that I've acquired with you folks, and I want to applaud all of you. I read your poems and give you full congratulations. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Cyril. I perfectly agree with your words when you talk about how the poems, are often an ethnographic account because spaces have a deep spiritual connection with the lifestyle, particularly in India, and I believe in other lands as well. So it is a culturally rich document that this book offers to readers across the world. Thank you. Thank you for that. And I would now like to call upon Jaydeep sir to talk about the anthology. Jaydeep sir, over to you.
I already had some words, but let me concentrate on a couple of things about the book. The great Chilean poet and diplomat Pablo Neruda once said, "Language is the language of the soul." I think this anthology is the language of the soul. And if you don't climb the mountain, you will never enjoy the view. Through this anthology, we climb the mountain, and another anthology in 5 years' time will strengthen our views from the top. Pablo Neruda in Gaia. Why did I talk about Neruda? Because there's a very interesting poem by Ashwini Kumar. And this anthology contains some amazing, amazing poems of different scope and of different mosaic. Some love poems here are very evocative because they combine the traditional elements of love poetry, such as the relationships and feelings between two people, and also mixes them with his or her relationship to the land and the wilderness. That is the anthology all about, because the space of the soul, cities, town, and villages. Many consider the famous Australian poet Eddie Hope as an interesting figure who used an erudite mind and a wicked wit to a different sort of criticism on poetry. Many poets, including the editors in this anthology, are literary critics, and they have their own reputation in their respective fields. For example, the prolific post-colonial scholar Professor John Thiem of the University of East Anglia is featured in this particular anthology. Their views enrich the soul spaces. The cover designer, book jacket theme maker, the publisher, the erudite scholars, and all esteemed contributors cheers, cheers for poetry. The subject of some of the poet's verses are varied in scope, stylistically, they are very different, and some are erotic verses to some extent, and hope is viewed as a satirical element through this land and people. Many break the traditional prosody and experiments with the star. Sukrita Paul Kumar writes, "To reach the waterway to my mother." I think through this anthology, we reach out to our mother. The sense of return, both in the sense of diaspora, present location, present age, there is always sense of return to cities, towns, villages, and soul spaces. Memory, homecoming, coming back to children, moods of illumination are very important subjective lines or or I call them lifelines of this very rare anthology. Now, good reviews at different places and through different modes of expressions will roll the anthology forward. Cheers for the poets who contributed. Cheers for the editors and all who are present in this afternoon, evening, morning in different time zones. Thank you all. Write more, publish more, and more such anthologies will enrich our journey. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. And from here, we move on to Malashri Di, who has also a critical interest in spaces. She has discussed this extensively in many of her critical works, and I hope that her presence as an editor has helped us critically view space and place. So, Malashri Di, over to you for your ideas.
Thank you very much, Basudhara, and thanks to all the people present this evening, and of course my co-editors. Congratulations to particularly our lead editors, Anita and Basudhara, and in a way, congratulations to all of us for achieving this remarkable feat of a multi-editorial international collection of which I can think of no other parallel. It's, as many others have said before me, it's truly international in its scope, in finding people from different parts of the world, and in covering a whole host of emotions and experiences. But what I'd like to do in the next few minutes that I have this evening is to say that to me, the collection suggests the urban theory context. And I want to place soul spaces within that context of urban theory, which has its origins in architecture, but gradually came to be understood in terms of the social sciences and the humanities. And what is very important is for literatures and writers such as we are today to take on the responsibility of interpreting material which is traditionally not ours. Because architecture, town planning, cities, and the transformation of villages is often looked at as an ethnographic, archaeological, anthropological study and not a literary enterprise. The first achievement of this book, I think, is to take up this dice of challenge and win it. That it actually is a book about people. It's about not spaces in the abstract, and that the basic contours of urban theory are time and space. But it doesn't mean anything unless you put human beings into it. And then what kind of human beings are we placing here? People from all over the world in different age groups, different cultural contexts. So it is extremely important for me to see that personalization of space that has happened. And that personalization is offering to the reader a kind of a matrix between a place which is never static. And it is the fluidity of that space which is interpreted through memory, experience, one's own or that of others, that makes this book so utterly significant. Anita mentioned the experience of migration. That is a running thread in the book. Now, the migrant person's perception of space is often with a gap of one time and a return to that space at another time. And the transition that has happened in the emotional journey of that speaker or that poet has to be correlated to the spatial journey that has happened in that particular original location. Now, that kind of a complication does not happen when the same individual is relating differently to the same space. Maybe there is somebody, and many writers are there, who've actually grown up in the city or grown up in the village. And they are the ones who are now looking at the differential that has happened within themselves that has impacted their poetry. As supposedly the town has remained static. That same Qutub Minar, that same India Gate is still there, but hasn't a person's relationship to that changed because of the experiences that the person has had, or because the town in time and spatiality has grown differently. Now, what I'm going to do for the next 2 minutes is to illustrate this with reading my own poem, because I actually experienced this business of having to negotiate a space in a certain way, because towns are planned, villages evolve. So I'm interested in what happens to the same structure over time. So I offered a poem on the Viceregal Lodge in Shimla. It's a space which was created by the imperial rulers in the 1880s, and today houses the Indian Institute of Advanced Studies and produces some highly well appreciated scholarly work. Now, that building has not changed. It's the same structure that was made in 1886. But the activities within it, the thought process and the emotions within it has changed. And that's, to me, the significant achievement of this book, that spaces and time does not stop. And for the poet, that becomes the absolutely significant nucleus of creativity. So here is the poem, it's a brief one. Viceregal Lodge, Shimla. Imposing, weather-worn lodge sitting on a brutally flattened observatory hill. Are you soaked in memories of the Raj, of viceroys who lived in splendor, and coolies who loved stone slabs uphill, of ballroom capers in chandeliered halls and dalliance in the garden, while the natives crouched in hovels, eating by flickering lamps? Today, you see the scholars in free India who live in a colonial building and speak anti-colonial. Portraits of the Sahibs have been replaced by national heroes. Native languages are victorious over the fading veins of English. Books have overlaid the ballroom floor, and office rooms no longer need to file military secrets. And you, the ghosts from imperial times, I see you trailing behind the scholars, scrambling their research, disturbing their nights with whispers in the wind. Will the rapacious past of England ever allow a settlement of Indian questions about hierarchy? Thank you. I'll just end there.
Thank you, Malashri Dee. And you pointed out a very significant fact that places and spaces, as they evolve, our relationships with them evolve. And the same place may be experienced in different ways at different points of one's time, or even when one is in different emotional frames. And that, I think, is very vital to the idea of poetry, which, as Cyril said, is a monument of the moment. So thank you very much for bringing in these ideas with relation to the book. And from Malashri Dee, we move over to Nandini Sahu for her views. Nandini ma, over to you.
Thank you, Mashu. Good evening and good morning to my fellow editors, my co-editors here, and all the poets in this beautiful anthology, Soul Spaces. Anita Nahal and Basudhara Roy, for taking the initiative and putting all of us together. I must thank you from the bottom of my heart. And Cyril and then Miller, I got introduced to them through this anthology, and it has been wonderful interacting with both of them, knowing their achievements, their poetry, and I'm so grateful to all of you for getting me introduced to such wonderful people. And Jaydeep Sarangi and Malashri Lal, we have been friends since many, many years. Jaydeep Sarangi has been a very good friend since our Kolkata and Odisha days. And once again, it's a pleasure to work with him. And Malashri ma'am, you have been an inspiration to many like me. And I'm so glad that I got a chance to work with you in this anthology. And Swati, a very dear friend who I met recently, and in very near future, again, I'm going to meet her and spend some quality time with Swati. So I'm so glad that I got to work with all of you through this anthology. It's like homecoming. It's like a family. so many poets. I was just telling that I know almost all of them. And such beautiful poetry. Everyone has written about their space, their place. Like Jaydeep ji told just now that this anthology is very democratic. Yes, it has been very democratic. I remember how Anita used to put us to vote for the jackets. She would send us 2 to 3 jackets and covers. Then she would ask us to vote for anyone, and the majority will be taken. And for everything, like she has taken views of each one of us, respecting the opinion of everybody and talking to everybody. It has been truly, truly democratic, Anita. I love you so much for that. And like Vasu told just now, that poetry as an ethnographic account. Yes, most of the poets have taken that into account, into consideration, while contributing the poems for this anthology. And what I'm going to do right now after this meeting is I'll ask one of my research scholars to maybe write an article or a review article for any newspaper or some journal on poetry theory symbiosis. Right? They can talk about poetry theory symbiosis and the study of this collection, this beautiful collection, Soul Spaces. And then Malashri ma'am just now she talked about archaeological study and poetry. So maybe this point also can be taken into consideration vis-a-vis the research on this very beautiful anthology. And I must thank Shubham for putting this beautiful jacket. Gray is my color, so when I see a gray cover, my heart goes out to it. And thank you very much, Sudarshanji, for bringing out such a beautiful anthology. I'm sure that this book is going to go places. It has a long way to go. And in my personal capacity as a professor in University IGNO, I will try to take some of the poems in some syllabus of our BA or MA courses. I will try to take the poems into the syllabus. I have been already talking to Anita about it. And I will try that some research goes into it and the book comes to public view. People talk about this book. I will do my bit as a teacher, as a researcher and a poet. And I'm looking forward to working with this beautiful, this wonderful team once again. Basudhara, the energy of the team, and Anita, the backbone of the team. And each one of you, I respect, I love all of you. Thank you.
Thank you, Nandini ma'am. It is very valuable. In fact, we were talking before the session officially began, we were talking about how in our various capacities and from the various regions that we as editors belong, we could think of organizing separate readings from the book. So they could be physical readings also. For example, people in and around Delhi could get together with Malashri Di for a reading. And then, similarly, they could get together with Swati ma'am for a reading. So independently, we could organize a few readings so that everybody gets a chance. There are, I believe, around 90 contributors to the book, and many of them have contributed around 3 poems, 1, 2, 3, that is the average, So it is a huge collection of so many poems, and the more readings there are, the more will the book be able to reach a wider audience. So thank you for considering that. Thank you very much. And from here, we move over to Swati ma'am. I was surprised to hear that all the while that the book was coming up, Swati ma'am was undergoing her NAC assessment in college. And as a principal, I keep on seeing her posts on Facebook. She's constantly busy. So we had 2 principals, Jaydeep sir and Swati ma'am, on the panel. And both of them have given us their best time despite all the numerous engagements that they had been going through. We are very grateful to have had you, Swati ma'am. Over to you to talk about your editorial journey.
Well, first and foremost, thank you so much, Anita and Basudhara, for giving me this opportunity. Frankly speaking, initially when Anita asked me, I was a little nervous because the people here, all the people here, are people I have learned to love and admire hugely. So I really felt I was going to be out of my depth, but not for 1 minute was I made to feel that I'm such a newbie when it comes to writing poetry. I was made to feel so included. I really felt I could do it. And that's been absolutely wonderful working with everyone. And I really thank the 2 of you in particular for giving me this opportunity to be a part of the editorial team. Now, everybody has spoken with great erudition. And I'm therefore going to speak very simply and very personally about soul spaces, about places. And a lot has to do with the fact that I come from a army background. My father was in the forces. He was an army doctor. So my relationship with spaces and places is partially decided by my army background and partially my own personality as a person. So just a few things that I want to say while working on the manuscript and reading poems by others and writing one of my own. The one thing I realized was that a city grows on you and you grow with the city. It's not really so much about love or hate. It is all about related memories and associations. I have vivid memories of a yellow colored gate that the house in Jalandhar had, which is the city of my birth. I remember it because I am the youngest of 4 siblings, and I would swing on the gate as I waited for them to return from school. And perhaps that is the only image I have of Jalandhar, as I was there for only the first 3 years of my life. Yet, like Wordsworth's daffodils, it flashes suddenly before my inner eye like a blast of sunshine. I remember clearly the culverts of Lucknow Cant SF quarters, they are called separated families quarters, where the families quarters, where I spent many years of my childhood. So on summer evenings, people spend hours talking. And it will all be a place for planning something. Cut to Calcutta in 1979, which is where I shifted to. And gosh, what with my rebellious teenage spirit and the spirited girls of La Martiniere first and Loreto House later, I find myself really unable to cull out one memory of that bustling, vibrant, slightly crazy and incredible city. After Lucknow, Calcutta was quite hard actually, because in my days, till 1978, Lucknow was a small, sleepy town, just a little more evolved than a village, perhaps. But Calcutta now I cannot separate myself from. It is a city that keeps me grounded in ways I cannot describe. And I wonder if there's some kind of Asian memory there. Whatever be Calcutta, and yes, that is what I will always call it. I'm never going to call it Kolkata. It will always draw me like a magnet, despite the traffic jams and the not quite so hospitable weather. I can never forget how there would be a joke in 1979 when I shifted there that Calcutta was the new hill station during the years when the metro was being made, as there would be hills of mud all over the city. It is the city I first fell in love in, and so discovered that I was capable of romantic love. Hence, it is inextricable from my soul. And now finally to Delhi. What am I going to say about Delhi? I think I'll just read out my poem on it, which is in the anthology, but I'll read it out. Dilli Dil Walon Ki, and loosely translated, Delhi, for those with a heart, it ends with a question mark. It pops up like a jack-in-the-box, the Hanuman temple clasping the metro train. Every time on the silver screen, it's New Delhi. Or else it's the Parathe Wale Gali, and dozens of pigeons flying over the Jama Masjid and the Ram Leela Maidan near the Lal Killa with the national flag aloft. Or now the much scoffed yet inevitable Rashtrapati Bhavan, and close on its heels the circular Connaught Place. I have been here for over 3 decades, and yet I connect with it as if I am flipping a coffee table book. Glossy pages, riveting pictures, and monuments of yore, like the Qutub Minar, looking dumbly at the tall, faceless skyscrapers sneaking up beside them. I'm still reading this city, even as my life is unfolding within it, and I sense the familiarity, yet I feel a stranger, a heart unawakened. The city, or me? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Swati ma'am, for bringing in that range of personal memory of your own travels and your roots, and how all of them converge together in this lovely poem, Dilli, that you read out at the end. Thank you very much. And so we miss Ethelbert, who has been one of us, one of the very significant editors on the board, who could not be here with us, but we miss him and we think of his contribution with love and fondness. And from here, we move over to our contributing poets. There are 5 of them here today who have been very generous to share their time on a Sunday evening with us. And so I would request all of them to talk a little about the book, what they felt when they wrote their poems, or what they feel when they hold the anthology in their hands, to talk about their connections with the poems, and also to read their poems for us. So over to Alka Tyagi, our first reader for the evening. Alka ma'am, over to you. You have to unmute. Alka ma'am.
Sorry. Namaste to everybody, and thank you very much, Basudha. I'm quite delighted to be in the presence of poets and these very erudite people. I know many of you, and I'm fortunate to know them whom I know. But today it feels like really as if, we are part of some kind of soul connection. And I think, as Jaydeep said, perhaps 5 years from hence, this book would have gone places and we will have another anthology. I was very impressed actually by the cover. So Shubham has really done a great job, and all the ephemeral experience that we feel as we move through spaces in our life, that experience is held by this wonderful cover. The romance, and as well as the materiality of the spaces. So the cover is capturing a lot. So congratulations to the cover designer and the ideas put up by Anita ji. I have read most of the poems in the anthology, but today I do not have the book in my hand because I'm not at home. So I will rather read a poem so that others can get more time, and since I don't have the book, I'll read my poem. It is called Shiva Kapalika. Kapalika is a tradition of tantric practitioners. They live at the periphery of the society, and they bear some insignia like a begging bowl called of the kapal, of human skull, and they wear kundal, big earrings. They hold a staff. They smear their bodies with sacred ash, the bhasma, and wander in the cremation ground. The poem is titled Shiva Kapalika, and here it goes. I hold the begging bowl of skull in my worn out flesh. The hole in my navel fills the vital breath. I mate with yoginis in the sky of my own consciousness. The 3 gunas, sattva, rajas, and tamas, are my sacred thread. I wear them as modes of illumination, anger, and indulgence, all with equal reverence. I sit in the core of my heart, illumined in body, speech, and thought. I am beyond sacred and non-sacred. I am Shiva, wandering in cremation grounds as Kapalika. That's where I will.
Thank you. Thank you. That was a lovely poem. That was a lovely poem. And thank you for bringing your views and this lovely poem into the gathering today. And from Alka Tyagi, we move over to Ameerah Shabazz-Bilal. Ameerah is driving today, but she has been very kind to agree to join and to read a poem when her turn comes. So Ameerah, over to you, and thank you for being with us.
Why, thank you. Just give me 1 second because I am driving. I'm going to pull over so that we're safe and I can share. And I have done that successfully. Can you guys hear me very well?
Yes, we can.
Okay. First of all, I want to talk about the experience and how elated I am to have been asked to be a part of this anthology. It was a great honor. I really experienced something that I can't even put into words at this moment, reading everybody's stories, their poems. It was almost as if I was transported to each and every one of your places, your spaces. And for that, that's an experience that I cannot even gather the words to say how it made me feel. So once again, thank you, editors. Thank you for appreciating the work. The cover is amazing. And I'm going to find ways to protect it because I want it to last long after I'm leaving this earth. I submitted 3 poems to the anthology, and the thing that I really, really appreciate is that we're all from different spaces. My work comes from the area of an urban town. So the references in the book are of this particular town in the state of New Jersey. The references also talk about being a child of the civil rights movement. I was born during that time. The changes in the community, being a part of a Caribbean family, moving from one area of a city to another as we began to desegregate. And so that is most of the background. I talk about the stores in the area. I talk about how we used to dress a little bit in the area. And I thank you for putting the references to some of the ideas or some of the concepts that I'm discussing in this poem. I thank you for the footnotes. So I'm going to read the poem, She Wore Those Brown Shoes. This is in reference to during the 60s when I was a child. We used to wear hard bottom shoes as babies. And these shoes are no longer being sold because the kids either walk barefoot or they wear sneakers or whatever the case may be. But we had these brown shoes that were from a particular brand name store called Buster Brown. And my mom had them as well. And she used to always talk about how she hated these shoes and how she would play this game called kickball so she could kick the toes out, thinking that they would then throw the shoes away. But my grandma bought her more. So that was the story that I heard all her life coming up. So once again, the title of the story is She Wore Those Brown Shoes. She wore those brown shoes and she marked Newark her own territory. She be from here, from a time when after-hour cafes back in the day played calypso blues and trumpet blur blues as conga drums beat loud calling bongs, night after night, singing the same jazz songs. Brown shoes tapping blues with greats like Sister Sarah Vaughan. She be from here, from a time when Ameerah sang Kaba blues, looking down into courtyards bubbling with brown hues, huddled there after making way for industry highways. Separated sections with multicolored reflections, called one ironbound, but north was still Newark. She be from here, from a time when the black church burned down and the rectory moved us folk downtown, where balconies groaned from black folks' moans, where segregation hours in the Lord's house kept folks sane while looking out the window at the views of Haynes. She be from here, From a time where S. Klein marked the spot, two guys joined in after Bambergers didn't know Macy's. Didn't know Macy's, where McCory sold the biggest panties in the basement, where the milk bar let Uncle Ray talk his ish before serving him his fish, where the South Side met Malcolm and changed its name, where the first black man rose to fame. Not you, Baraka. No, his name was Ken. You didn't even know yourself back then. She be from here, from a time when John's bargain store was a dirty word, from when Army and Navy had two stores, from the Adams, the Lowe's, the Paramount, the Elmwood. Stay away from the little. All the kids tried to solve that riddle. From Broad Street cafes and Branford Place, down all aboard Greyhound Penn Stay. From Tom McCann, chock full of nuts, McCory's cotton candy, and cone-shaped paper cups. Orbex, Cresty, Woolworths, 5 and dime, way before dollar stores were the fine. From RKO Proctors and sneak into drive-ins. She be from here, from a time when her Buster Browns could be found on the feet that stomped around here from mornings to dark in Branchbrook Park with T-shirts that read straight out of New York. Thank you. Oh.
Thank you, Ameerah. Thank you very much for that lovely poem, for your views,
Thank
and most importantly, for being with us in solidarity today. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Have a safe journey. And from Ameerah, we move over to Maitreyee. Maitreyee always has a very unique sense of connection with place. She travels a lot, and she's the one to note the most, the most obvious and yet invisible things about place get to Maitreyee, which is what I have noticed from the way she writes her poems, from the way she writes her essays and her nonfiction. So over to Maitreyee for her views and also for her wonderful poem.
Thank you, Basudhara. Am I audible to all of you?
Yes, perfect.
My thanks to the editors. I'm very, very happy to be part of this anthology. I'm a poet who's slightly shy of being part of anthologies, and for whatever reasons, but like Jaydeep and the others have also mentioned before, this truly felt democratic. And I remember when Basudhara first approached me, this had an instant connection with me because I'm a bit of a flaneur. And like Basudhara has mentioned, I also come from a migrant family, and my association or understanding of places has been through my walks through the cities. And I have my first book of poetry, in fact, which I wrote while in Banaras, was when I spent a month in Banaras walking through the gullies of Banaras and writing down. I was just scribbling poems. Am I audible? Yeah. Yes. This came as something that I could really relate to. The two poems that I'm about to read and which are part of this anthology were written just prior to, one was just in between the COVID, and the second one was prior to COVID. So it bears a sort of semblance of the city I discovered through my walks. So, I'll be reading these two poems. And like Anita mentioned, being a migrant, has, I think, gives people a unique perspective into spaces, into areas. And as Basudhara also mentioned, I've written a lot about migration, and I've written as much about people I've watched. I'm very fond of people watching. So the people I watch through my walks, I think the poems will be self-explanatory. So without further ado, let me just read them. Also, I must mention that My poetic influences have been the beat poets, the beat generation poets, um, uh, people like Jim Carroll, mad women like Gabrielle Mistral. So it perhaps will bear some semblance, in my poetry. The first poem is titled as "The City of My Walks." Like the bitch in heat, I forage through the city. I talk myself to walking. Gulmohars in summer and jacarandas in spring. The tababuya between the flyovers and palash through the traffic. The city I taught myself to walk in measured me in sense of the in-betweens. With your limp by my side, I now watch masked unknown's patrol. The dogs still stand guard in the unnamed cemetery we walked by. Dead stories circulate here to those twice dead. In the city that taught us to walk, now no one walks. The second poem is called Tuesdays. So this is very sacred kind of church. It's called the Church of Anthony. And the reason why it's very endearing to me is because this is a church for the poor. And when I say church for the poor, I mean that it is the poor primarily who flock to this church. And Anthony is the patron saint of the lost and found. So people come to pray to Anthony when they lose their things. I found it very, very interesting. And on most Tuesdays, I would visit Anthony's church to watch people lighting a candle and, asking for, to return to them the things that they had lost. So Tuesdays. Waking up to the smell of Tuesdays is remembering Anthony's down Miller's Road. Patron saint of the lost, he's enveloped in burnt wax all day. People at the altar here are without language. There's only drishti, as different from sight, or the ability to see. But drishti takes you beyond, becomes language, and assumes the ability to remember a past. Affection and memory come close second. What one loses here comes back, they say. What stays then, you ask, and how? Habit is part memory, part servitude. To a past without an address now, we walk then. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Maitreyee, for those lovely poems. And yes, much of your writing, fiction and non-fiction deals with places. And so, when the theme came up, you were the first person that we could think of. Thank you. Thank you for being with us here. And from Maitreyee, we move over to Satbir Chadha ma'am, and for her lovely poems and also for her observations on the book. Over to you.
Thank you, Basudhara. Thank you, all of you. I'm obliged to Anita and to all of you for including me in this anthology. I'm really honored to. I'll not talk much, but just straight go to the point. I have written about the place where I grew up. It's a small town called Haldwani. And I've traveled a lot. I've stayed in different cities, Bombay, Delhi, Hyderabad. But Haldwani remains the place where I want to go to, just like a child always wants to seeking his mother's knee, So that is my small little town. And I'm glad that it's still there and I can still visit it. So it's in two parts. The first part is the happy one. The second one I'll tell you. And I'll straight talk about my poem, straight go to my poem. I want to go to Haldwani. I want to go to Haldwani. I want to go to the happy little town that smelt of abundance, that began and ended on a single shady road going up to the railhead at Kathgodam, that nestled under the green canopy of mountains. Idyllic. Beside the road ran a rainwater canal that brought down the overflow of rivulets and streams and springs in the hills. It naturally obeyed its boundaries. Never has it crossed them, I know. A gurgling, chirpy, happy water canal called the Neher. Such peace and cool it spreads that one can spend hours in its company. Parallel to the Neher is a boulevard guarded on both sides by ancient trees that rustle away the summer heat like enormous fans. Across the boulevard is my home, whitewashed with lime, tall pillars and long verandas with a mango orchard around. We'd hear the howls of jackals and wolves in quiet, starry nights when we all slept in the open to soothing northerlies, the air heavy with the fragrance of night jasmines and mogras, and awoke to the crowing cocks, chirping sparrows, and mooing cows. Everybody loved everybody and cared for everybody. All were अपने ही यहाँ के. We never feared anybody. Kids played with water snakes that came floating down the Neher, picked up frisky toads as they croaked when it rained. Our lives were aligned to nature, to the sun and moon, to winter, summer, and fall, and the precious monsoon. We ate homegrown veggies and freshly plucked fruits, sharing half ripened mangoes and tangy tamarinds. Much has grown and will continue to grow. The town is a city now. 7 decades have passed. 7 decades have passed, and much water has flown down the Neher. But the shady road and boulevard and lime washed home still beckon me. I want to go to Haldwani. So the next part, the small part, I added because again, as you said, spaces grow, spaces move, and histories happen, geographies happen, societies happen. So this is in 2021, there was a huge calamity. There were torrential rainfalls, landslides, and a lot of the hills were damaged. And this was written then. I again want to go to Haldwani. I want to go to Haldwani. I want to travel the broken road, to explore the cracks and crevices, the patches swept away with the torrent, to bleed for the pellets loosened and swept away, thrown out of their homes and crushed, little ones crushed under huge rocks, to weep for them. They'll never get back home. It's sad. The hills weep every year, pools and pools of tears and blood. These stalwarts of millennia have been pricked and axed, torn and bled, shorn and burnt, and now they can't hold up anymore. Their skin peels and trickles, then falls off in a lash, a splash. Destruction follows. I weep for my dear hills. I want to go to Haldwani. Thank you, dear friends.
Thank you, ma'am, for those two lovely poems and how how they contrast with one another and how they move and speak to one another. It's fascinating. Thank you for bringing those poems to us. And I think we take away that everyone loved everyone, and which is something which is very rare these days. Sab apne hi hain. But we're very glad that we share a virtual space at this moment where sab apne hi hain. And thank you for bringing that sentiment. We move over to Sunil Sharma sir. Incidentally, I don't know if Sunil Sharma sir remembers, but I believe 3 to 4 years ago, he was the first one who told me that why don't you write something on your city, Basudhara? Try to visualize your city as a character and try to write something on your city for Setu. He was, I think, running a series for Setu at that time on Place. And he had asked me to do that. But I think I was too juvenile and too immature to handle it at that moment. But it was in my mind and it continuously has stayed. So Sunil Sharma said, thank you for teaching me to look at place more vitally than I had done before. And over to you for your observations on the book and your lovely poems.
Thank you, Vasudhara. In fact, I am learning from all of you. And I have sent another request to you to write for Setu, 7th year, more than 35 lakh viewers, bilingual journal. And now, namaskar from Toronto. Thanks again, dear hosts, for the overall generosity and the space given in this anthology. Monumental, inspiring, relevant. I stand out in the market, surfeit with such anthologies. A pleasure to be here on this exciting platform today. A pleasure listening to all of you. Back with friends I admire. Lucky to be interacting with some of them today. Heard some fine poetry, things about poetry, editing places, powerful words, very, very lyrical. An enriching experience listening to these high-profile, prolific speakers, poets as thinkers. A pleasure, real pleasure listening to Malashri Di, Satbir Chadha, and of course, all of you, colleagues like Principal Swati Pal. I know the pains and pleasures of being the administrative head. I was also a college principal affiliated to the University of Mumbai before coming over here, still connected with them. And of course, my dear friend, Jaydeep, and of course, Anita ji is a great inspiration, like rest of you. Well, talking about this anthology, I would just say it has made a huge impact. It's conceptually different, fresh, invigorating. Congratulations to all of you for making it happen and for this soft book launch. Here goes my poem from the solid collection, Articulating Search for Soul Spaces by the Humans on the Go, a poem about migration, pains of displacement, work, and deep inner desire to connect with the roots and the lost homes. Here it goes, title Nomads on a Recall Moat. Some remain in perpetual transit. No city, town, or village can ever hold them down forever. The desires and dreams unsettle them and compel them to move on, disband, unsettle, unsettle in an evolutionary journey. When the night arrives with the softness of a young mother's hands, tender darkness remains unpierced by the urban lamps. A town unfolds incrementally as a sequence before the sleep-heavy eyes. Old, twisted alleys resurface, places filled with the sounds of the temple bells, shadows of the shady trees that shimmer on the streets in the foggy light. Brick houses lean over each other, and the neighbors talk over the low walls in animated gestures and modulating voices. And the faces that lit up when an old face floated in the crowds return on their nightly streams. The last lines: hometowns can be abandoned, but hometowns never vacate the spaces within the souls. Thank you very much for your patient listening, for this opportunity. A pleasure collaborating with all of you. Again, let me say a pleasure listening to each one of you during your brief presentation. Some fine poetry here. Thanks for this opportunity. Wish you all the best. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And as we come to an end, let us all hold together our covers, our books, so that, mine is not so visible perhaps, but here it is, so that we can all take a picture. I'll just take a screenshot. 1, 2, 3, and we go. Cyril? A little to the left.
I have my copy here. Sorry, Basudhara.
Okay. No worries. We'll just we'll just take a picture of all those who have a copy for the moment. Yes, I got that. Thank you very much. And with this, I believe that the book officially, enters the world, though it has been here for a few months now. And we are very grateful that this could be organized, that all of us could come together at a very, very short notice. So deepest apologies for, hustling this up, for hurrying you up. But we are very grateful that this did happen. So I'll just thank each of you for sparing your time on a Sunday to be with us. And this means a lot to poetry, to the anthology, and to the Hearth Within. Thank you very, very, very much.
Thank you, everyone. Such a joy to listen to everyone.
Thank you to everyone who joined. Thank you so much. Thank you, Basudhara.
Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone.
Malashri.
Thank you.
Thank you, Maitreyee.